Welcome to the Hot News Channel, where we strip away the noise to analyze today's breaking stories. It is Monday, February 23, 2026.
And today isn't just a Monday. If historians are paying attention to this, and, well, assuming there are historians left to write the books in 50 years, this might be the exact day we look back on as the moment the post-World War II order officially fractured.
That is a heavy opener, even for us. Usually, we try to ease into the week.
Right.
But looking at the massive stack of reports on the desk today, I really don't think easing in is an option. I don't think it's hyperbole to say we are looking at a convergence of crises that is, frankly, unprecedented.
It's a complete paradigm shift.
Exactly. We have a constitutional crisis at home regarding tariffs that has the executive branch effectively declaring war on the judiciary. We have a potential hot war with Iran that could kick off within 10 days. And we have a massive corporate exodus led by Microsoft that threatens to end United States tech dominance overnight.
It's a perfect storm. You have the geopolitical, the economic, and the constitutional all buckling at the exact same time. And usually when we do these deep dives, we try to isolate one thread. We say, okay, let's just look at the economy, or let's just look at the war.
Keep it contained.
Yeah, keep it contained. But today the mission is different. The mission today is to connect these dots for you. We need to understand how the chaos in the White House, the explosive intelligence leaks regarding Jeffrey Epstein, and the maneuvering of foreign powers, both enemies and allies, are all part of the same unraveling tapestry. You simply can't understand one without the other.
Let's unpack this, starting with the most immediate threat to life and limb, the brink of war. We have been tracking the standoff with Iran for months now, but the timeline just compressed dramatically. I'm looking at the raw transcript from President Trump's Board of Peace meeting. And before we even get to the hard data, can we just pause on the name, the Board of Peace?
It's completely Orwellian, isn't it? The Ministry of Peace in 1984 was concerned strictly with war. The irony of that name, Board of Peace, while they're sitting there discussing an invasion and the deployment of carrier strike groups, it really shouldn't be lost on anyone. It frames the administration's mindset perfectly. War is the path to peace, and escalation is the only tool left in the box.
Exactly. But here is the hard data that came out of that room. Trump stated, and I quote, "So now we may have to take it a step further, or we may not. Maybe we're going to make a deal. You're going to be finding out over probably the next 10 days. I really want to zero in on that. 10 days.
10 days. That is a massive, massive shift.
Yeah.
Just a week ago, the narrative coming out of the State Department was a month-long negotiation window. There was all this talk of back-channel discussions happening in Oman. This sudden acceleration to 10 days suggests the diplomatic channel has completely collapsed. But, there's a logistical angle here, too.
What do you mean by logistical? Is 10 days just a random number he threw out there for effect?
I don't think so. When you look at the naval movements we've been tracking, specifically regarding the Gerald Ford Carrier Strike Group and its support flotilla, 10 days is roughly the operational window required to move the full support fleet into a combat-ready position.
Right, because you don't just
park a carrier and start shooting. You have to establish fuel lines. You need a destroyer screen for missile defense, an air defense corridor. When the president says you're going to be finding out in 10 days, he's likely referencing a strict military timeline, not a diplomatic one. It means the pieces are actively moving on the board.
And we have some real insight into why the diplomacy collapsed, thanks to an analysis of Steve Witkoff's public statements. Now, for listeners who might not know the inner circle well, Witkoff isn't a four-star general. He's a real estate tycoon.
A developer.
Right, a developer. And he's one of Trump's closest envoys to the region. He went on the record and said the president is curious and shocked that Iran has not yet capitulated despite the massive United States naval buildup.
Curious. That word is terrifying in this context. It reveals a fundamental miscalculation inside the White House. Witkoff is a real estate guy. In real estate, leverage is purely financial. If I have more money and better lawyers, you fold, you take the deal.
Because it's a business transaction.
Exactly. The entire strategy here was predicated on the idea that if you park a floating city, the Gerald Ford, off their coast, Tehran folds. They assumed fear alone would cause disarmament.
But they aren't folding.
No, they are not. And Witkoff openly admitting he is shocked by that is a staggering admission of intelligence failure. They're projecting their own corporate values onto the adversary. They think Iran is a distressed asset looking for a buyout. But Iran views this as a holy war.
An existential struggle.
An existential struggle for survival. You cannot intimidate a regime that fundamentally believes martyrdom is a victory. Witkoff is essentially admitting they don't understand the adversary they are about to fight.
Witkoff actually went further, claiming Iran is, quote, a week away from industrial bomb-making material. He's using that ticking clock rhetoric we've heard before.
Shades of aluminum tubes and yellow cake uranium.
Exactly. But here's where it gets really interesting and incredibly dangerous. We have analysis from Jackson Hinkle and George Galloway that paints a picture of the military reality that Witkoff seems to be completely ignoring.
The reality on the ground, or rather, in the silos. Because while Witkoff is busy counting days until they get a nuke, he's completely ignoring the conventional threat that already exists today.
Right. The data from Hinkle's analysis shows Iran is currently producing over 3,000 missiles per month. And I want to be clear about this for everyone listening. We aren't talking about the rudimentary rockets we saw in decades past. We aren't talking about SCDs that miss their target by a mile.
No.
These are precision munitions. And while Witkoff is shocked they haven't surrendered, the Iranians are looking at a United States military that is stretched incredibly thin.
That is the vital context here. This isn't 1991. This isn't Operation Desert Storm, where we had 6 full months to build up a massive global coalition and endless supply lines. This isn't even 2003. The United States military stockpiles have been severely depleted by the ongoing conflict in Ukraine.
We've sent everything over there.
We have shipped massive amounts of 155mm artillery, Patriot systems, and air defense interceptors to Eastern Europe. And now, right now, we are parking our most expensive naval assets, which are essentially floating cities within range of an adversary that possesses hypersonic capabilities.
I really want to drill down on that term, hypersonic. We hear it thrown around a lot on the news, but help us understand the actual physics here. Why does that specific technology change the game for a carrier group?
It changes everything. Look, a standard cruise missile flies at maybe 500, 600 miles per hour. A ballistic missile goes very fast, but it follows a highly predictable arc, like a fly ball in baseball.
You can calculate the trajectory?
Exactly. You calculate where it will be, and you shoot an interceptor to meet it. But a hypersonic missile travels at Mach 5 or higher. That's 5 times the speed of sound. But the raw speed isn't even the main problem. It's the maneuverability. And, crucially, it's the plasma sheath.
A plasma sheath?
Yes. When you travel that fast through the Earth's atmosphere, the sheer friction creates a cloud of superheated plasma around the missile body. That plasma absorbs radio waves. It literally makes the missile invisible to traditional radar until it is seconds away from impact. Our Aegis defense systems on the destroyers are the best in the world, but they rely on seeing the target early. You can't hit what you can't lock onto.
George Galloway's analysis was particularly stark regarding this exact point. He argues this is a doomsday scenario for the Navy. He points out that the shock and awe strategy, weeks of airstrikes without a ground invasion, it assumes the enemy can't shoot back effectively.
Which is a fatal assumption.
Right, because if Iran has thousands of these missiles and they have hypersonic capabilities that bypass Aegis radar, the loss of an American aircraft carrier isn't just a distant possibility. Galloway argues it's a high probability.
And if a carrier goes down, that's 5,000 American sailors in an afternoon. That is a national trauma we haven't experienced since Pearl Harbor. And the response from Washington would almost certainly be nuclear. That's the escalation ladder we are standing at the very bottom of right now looking up.
And think about the global economic recoil. We are already seeing oil jump. The price went from $65 to $71 a barrel just on the rumors of this escalation over the weekend.
That's all whispers.
If the Strait of Hormuz is closed, which Iran has the clear capability to do with those 3,000 missiles a month, we are looking at oil hitting $250, maybe even $300 a barrel.
The Strait of Hormuz is the primary choke point of the entire world. 20% of the world's oil passes through that narrow channel. If Iran mines it, or even just trains those mobile missile batteries on any commercial tanker that tries to pass through, the global economy stops dead in its tracks.
It's not just paying more at the pump.
No, $300 oil doesn't just mean expensive gas for your commute. It means agricultural fertilizer becomes too expensive to manufacture. Food prices triple within weeks. Trucking companies go bankrupt overnight. It's a global depression, instantly.
And the analysis points out that it's not just Iran we'd be fighting. We have to look at the Russian connection here. Stanislav Krapivnik's analysis highlights that Russia and China haven't just been sitting on the sidelines eating popcorn. They have actively moved specialized equipment into the region specifically designed to jam United States systems and track Starlink receivers.
This is exactly what the Board of Peace is missing. This isn't a proxy war anymore. If Russian electronic warfare systems are blinding United States ships and Chinese satellite data is actively feeding Iranian targeting computers, we are walking blind into a direct confrontation with great powers.
And we're doing it on their turf.
Exactly. We are geographically disadvantaged. They are fighting in their backyard. We are fighting an ocean away, relying on extremely vulnerable supply lines.
Krapivnik makes the critical point that color revolutions and decapitation strikes, which is the usual Washington playbook, won't work here because the adversary is deeply entrenched. And frankly, they view this as an existential fight. They believe they are fighting for their very survival.
Which makes them infinitely more dangerous than an adversary fighting over a trade deal or border dispute. The White House is treating this like a Manhattan real estate negotiation, where you can just walk away from the table if you don't like the counteroffer. But war doesn't have a walk-away clause once the hypersonic missiles start flying.
So we have the military potentially walking into a massive trap abroad. Now let's turn our attention to the home front, because the situation here is just as volatile. We are officially calling this the economic civil war.
A brutal war between the executive branch and the judiciary, with the American consumer caught right in the crossfire.
Let's break down the Supreme Court ruling first. The court struck down President Trump's initial emergency tariffs. The ruling was explicit. The president must go through Congress for this kind of broad, sweeping economic policy. It was a very clear constitutional boundary being drawn.
A necessary reassertion of the separation of powers. The founders never intended for one single man to be able to rewrite global trade policy on a whim. That power belongs to the House, to the people's representatives.
Exactly. But Trump's reaction wasn't to go to Congress. He didn't draft a bill or negotiate. He completely ignored the ruling. He announced a brand new 15% global tariff, citing Section 122 and the Trade Act of 1974 to bypass the court entirely. He literally ramped it up from a 10% threat on Friday to 15% on Saturday just to show the judges he could.
Yeah.
But help us out here with the legal maneuvering. What exactly is Section 122? Is this a legitimate legal loophole?
Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974 was designed specifically for balance of payments emergencies. It was meant to be a delicate surgical scalpel. If the United States dollar was actively crashing or our national reserves were fleeing the country, the president could impose temporary stopgap measures to stabilize the currency.
So it's an emergency brake.
Right. It was never, ever intended to be a sledgehammer for a global trade war or a blunt tool to punish political enemies. By using it in this manner, the executive branch is effectively declaring that the Supreme Court's interpretation of the law simply does not apply to its economic agenda.
This is the soap opera economy in full swing, and uncertainty is the ultimate killer of business. You cannot plan a complex supply chain. You cannot build a new manufacturing facility. You certainly cannot hire workers when the tax rate on your raw materials changes by 50% over a holiday weekend based on a president's mood.
It creates total paralysis. If I'm a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, I'm sitting on my cash. I'm not investing a dime. And that capital paralysis is exactly what leads to a deep recession.
And while Washington is busy fighting with itself, our neighbors are taking off the gloves. This is the story that I think is the most underreported right now, but potentially the most devastating for daily life. We need to talk about Canada and the Carney principle.
Mark Carney, former head of the Bank of England, former head of the Bank of Canada, now officially advising the Canadian government. He's not a man who engages in petty social media spats. He is a technocrat's technocrat. He engages in systemic leverage.
The analysis from Think Outside on this exact topic is absolutely chilling. They detail a strategy Carney is reportedly deploying right now. The quote that perfectly sums it up is, "You don't fight a man who punches, you fight the floor."
That is such a profound strategic image. Meaning, you don't trade tariffs for tariffs. You don't get into a crude punching match where the bigger guy inevitably wins. You remove the stability the opponent is currently standing on. You tilt the floor so aggressively that he falls over on his own.
And that stability, in this specific case, is electricity. Think Outside dug up a classified Department of Energy document titled Cross-Border Energy Interdependency Vulnerability Analysis. And according to this document, 12 United States, including New York, Vermont, and large swaths of New England, rely heavily on Canadian hydroelectric power for their baseload capacity.
Baseload is the operative word there. We need to do a quick physics lesson here because people hear electricity and think it's all exactly the same thing. They think, oh, if Canada cuts the cord, we'll just turn on more solar panels down in Arizona.
Right, people say we have plenty of sun, plenty of wind. But that's not how the grid actually works, is it?
Not at all. The power grid operates like a human heartbeat.
Yeah.
It has to maintain a perfectly constant frequency, exactly 60 hertz. If that frequency dips even a fraction of a percent, the whole thing completely collapses. To keep it steady, especially when millions of people turn on their air conditioning units or industrial elevators at the exact same time, you need what engineers call inertia.
Physical momentum.
Yes.
Yeah.
You need heavy, massive spinning turbines that carry physical momentum. That's what hydroelectric dams provide. That's what nuclear reactors provide. Solar panels and wind turbines, they provide raw energy, but they do not provide inertia. They are intermittent by nature.
So you're saying if Canada pulls the plug on the hydro feed coming out of Quebec, New York can't just flip a switch to another source?
Physics says absolutely not. You cannot build a new power plant in 72 hours. You cannot spin up a massive coal plant that was decommissioned and gutted 5 years ago in a week. If that baseload disappears, the grid loses its heartbeat. We aren't just talking about expensive electricity bills. We are talking about immediate cascading blackouts.
The really dangerous kind.
The kind where traffic lights fail during rush hour, hospitals are forced to run on diesel generators until the fuel runs out in 2 days, and the subway stops dead in the tunnel.
Canada has effectively signaled they will apply a sovereign energy premium to these power exports in retaliation to the tariffs. The immediate impact. The governor of New York is currently in emergency sessions. We are talking about 68 million Americans at risk of massive, immediate energy pricing spikes.
And this is Mark Carney fighting the floor. He knows full well that Trump fights with tariffs, which are ultimately just paperwork. Canada is fighting with physics. They're fighting with electrons. And physics always wins.
The Think Outside report notes that Trump's response to this threat was reportedly, quote, "We've got plenty of power. We don't need their water," which, as you just noted, demonstrates a fundamental, terrifying misunderstanding of how the North American grid functions.
It's a complete misunderstanding of how deeply integrated the North American economy actually is. We have spent 30 years building a seamless cross-border energy grid because it was highly efficient. It kept manufacturing prices down for Americans. But now, that efficiency has suddenly become a fatal choke point. If Canada throttles that flow or prices it completely out of reach, the Northeast United States goes dark or it goes bankrupt, paying the premium.
And the floor is tilting dramatically in the tech sector, too. This brings us to the tech exodus. We have a massive bombshell report that Microsoft, under the direction of Satya Nadella, is moving their entire advanced artificial intelligence headquarters to Toronto.
This is the kind of tectonic news that changes the trajectory of a nation for decades. We aren't talking about them opening a cute satellite office for marketing. We were talking about the brain trust, the absolute center of gravity for the most important technology of the 21st century.
The raw data here is a leaked 127-page Microsoft board presentation. It's titled Global Artificial Intelligence Operations, Risk-Adjusted Location Analysis. It's written in very dry corporate speak, but the actual content is screaming, "Get out while you still can."
What stands out to me the most in that document is the internal classification. They literally classified the United States as a Tier 1 operational risk environment.
Let's define that for the audience. What exactly constitutes a Tier 1 risk?
In corporate risk assessment, Tier 1 is a critical category usually reserved for unstable countries with active internet censorship, volatile regimes, or highly unpredictable regulatory environments. We're talking about places where the local government might arbitrarily seize your physical assets or change the corporate laws overnight without any due process.
Like what's happening with the tariffs?
Exactly. Think about the gravity of that. Microsoft, an iconic American company founded in New Mexico, headquartered in Redmond, Washington, is formally telling its board of directors that the United States is now in the exact same risk category as an unstable dictatorship.
They aren't leaving because Canada offered a slightly better corporate tax break. They are leaving because the United States has become functionally hostile to long-term planning. We're talking about 15,000 of the smartest engineers in the world moving north.
This is the definitive end of American exceptionalism in the tech sector. The Pentagon has been screaming from the rooftops that machine-learned supremacy is the single most important strategic goal of this century. They know that whoever wins this compute race wins the future of warfare, global economics, and medicine.
It's the new space race.
It is. And here we have the primary engine of that supremacy, Microsoft, packing up the moving trucks and crossing the northern border because the president's trade wars and erratic executive orders make it mathematically impossible to plan for the future.
It's a brain drain of epic historic proportions. And speaking of the Pentagon and advanced compute, we have another front opening up in this civil war. This time, it's the Defense Department versus the developers at Anthropic.
This is the artificial intelligence safety war, and it connects directly back to that overarching theme of erratic, dangerous leadership.
We have concrete reports that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is explicitly threatening to designate Anthropic as a supply chain risk. Now, supply chain risk sounds like boring bureaucratic paperwork, but it's actually the kiss of death in that industry, isn't it?
It's the absolute nuclear option in government contracting. If Anthropic is officially designated a supply chain risk, it means any single company that works with the federal government, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Raytheon, even huge consulting firms like Deloitte, they all have to cut ties with Anthropic immediately or lose their own lucrative government contracts. It's a targeted attempt to bankrupt them overnight.
And why are they doing this? Because Anthropic flat out refuses to hand over their Claude advanced learning model without strict ethical restrictions.
Specifically, Anthropic is drawing a hard moral line in the sand regarding human-in-the-loop protocols. They are refusing to allow their proprietary modders to be used for fully autonomous weapons, meaning weapon systems that select, track, and engage human targets without a real person ever pulling the trigger. And they are also refusing to allow it to be used for mass domestic surveillance on American citizens.
So because this company actually has a moral boundary, because they don't want their code to independently kill people, the government is trying to destroy them financially. Meanwhile, the major competitors like Google and Elon Musk's advanced compute companies have reportedly agreed to all lawful use standards.
All lawful use is a very dark euphemism for whatever you want to do with it. Blank check. Exactly. If the president signs an order saying it's lawful to sweep the data of every American, then the model will do it without hesitation. If the president says it's lawful to launch a drone swarm that picks targets autonomously based on facial recognition, the system will do it. This is the terrifying pivot point in modern history. We are rapidly integrating autonomous systems that even their own creators admit they don't fully understand into our nuclear command structures and autonomous kill chains.
We saw the resignation letter from Anthropic's safety officer, Jan Like. It was haunting to read. He explicitly warned that the world is in profound peril and that, quote, wisdom must grow with capacity.
He's completely right. And consider the fascinating anecdote about where some of these top safety researchers are physically relocating to. One of them reportedly bought a remote farm in the Scottish Highlands, far away from major population centers, far away from any potential nuclear targets.
That tells you everything.
When the very people building the machine are resigning in protest and fleeing to remote locations to grow their own potatoes, we should probably stop and listen to them. The government is actively strong-arming the only company asking moral questions, while the companies that are just blindly saying yes to get the massive defense contracts are being handed the keys to the entire arsenal.
It's a rapid race to the bottom, and it's being led by a defense secretary who, according to the intelligence we have, is being described by Pentagon insiders as old drunkie.
Which is horrifying on a purely personal level, but on a grand strategic level, it suggests a complete lack of operational discipline. It paints a vivid picture of an administration that views ethical constraints as wokeness and essential safety protocols as unpatriotic obstruction. They just want the weapon, and they absolutely do not want the safety manual.
Which brings us to the darkest, most disturbing part of today's deep dive. If we really want to talk about the moral character of the elite class, the people currently making these monumental decisions about hypersonic war and autonomous weapons, we have to open the Epstein files.
This is the segment that explains why the system is so fundamentally broken. It's the deep rot at the very core of the establishment.
The recent massive dump of files has caused absolute panic in Washington. But if you look at the mainstream media, they are desperately trying to bury the lead. They focus entirely on the shiny celebrity names, but we need to focus on three specific angles that the independent analysts are digging up: Steve Bannon, the Hunt email, and the intelligence connection.
Let's start with Bannon, because for years he's been carefully painted as this fierce, anti-establishment, populist loyalist, the guy fighting the deep swamp.
The text messages from late 2017 and 2018 shatter that carefully crafted image completely. We have raw data showing Bannon texting Jeffrey Epstein. And he's not just casually chatting. Bannon is actively discussing invoking the 25th Amendment to forcefully remove Trump from office.
Let's play devil's advocate for just a second here. Could Bannon theoretically claim he was just mining Epstein for insider info, trying to figure out what the so-called deep state was up to.
That's exactly what his defenders might try to say. But look at the text regarding the public relations strategy. Epstein is actively advising Bannon on how to, quote, crush the pedo-trafficking narrative and successfully rebuild his public image as a legitimate philanthropist. And Bannon isn't recoiling in disgust, he's engaging with it.
Crush the narrative. That specific phrase is the smoking gun here. If you are secretly mining a bad guy for info, you do not help him fix his catastrophic PR problem. You don't help him strategically cover up his crimes against minors. That implies a working partnership. It proves that Bannon wasn't a righteous crusader against the corrupt elite. He was actively auditioning for them. He wanted access to Epstein's vast financial network. He was plotting a presidential coup with a known sex trafficker while simultaneously working the populist base for donations.
But the depravity goes much, much deeper than sleazy political maneuvering. We have to talk about the specific email uncovered by the analyst Sabby Sabs. It's dated October 2016. The subject line is simply, "Thrilling Hunt."
This is undoubtedly the most disturbing document I've seen in years, and I review a lot of dark material for this broadcast.
The content refers to, and I really have to be careful with the language here, but I will quote the document directly because we cannot sanitize the truth of this. It says, N-word snipe hunt is over, and mentions moon crickets in field bag.
We have to call this exactly what it is. This moves the entire Epstein story beyond just sex trafficking, which is obviously horrific enough on its own, into the realm of organized, racially motivated manhunts. Moon crickets is a vile, archaic racial slur. Field bag heavily implies taking a physical trophy, exactly like you would bag a deer or a pheasant on a hunting trip.
It sounds like the plot of a twisted horror movie, The Most Dangerous Game. But it's right there in the verified emails. This heavily suggests that Little St. James wasn't just a high-end brothel for billionaires. It was a literal hunting ground.
And it suggests the elites participating in these events viewed these victims not just as disposable objects for gratification, but as literally subhuman prey. It's a hate crime factory, fully protected by the most powerful people in the world. And yet, the mainstream media is completely silent on this specific email. Why aren't they covering the hunt?
Maybe because in the third critical angle in the files, the intelligence connection.
The drop site news report by Ryan Grimm is absolutely essential reading here. They found hard, verifiable data showing the Israeli government directly installed and physically maintained the advanced security system at Epstein's Manhattan apartment.
They sent operatives to drill holes in the walls for fiber optic cables. They set up the hidden cameras. Why on earth would a foreign sovereign government do free home improvement for a Wall Street financier?
Because former Prime Minister Ehud Barak was staying there so frequently, the apartment was effectively operating as a fortified state residence. But let's connect the obvious dots here. You do not have a foreign intelligence service wiring your private town home with military-grade surveillance equipment unless you are a confirmed active asset.
This finally confirms what so many independent researchers have suspected for decades. Epstein wasn't just a sick pervert with a lot of money, he was an intelligence hub. He was systematically gathering blackmail, compromise on the most powerful politicians, scientists, and CEOs in the world.
Which perfectly explains the unprecedented legal protection he enjoyed. It explains why Les Wexner, the retail billionaire who primarily funded Epstein's operation, admitted under oath in his deposition that the FBI and the Department of Justice never once questioned him.
That was the absolute key takeaway from the reason to resist analysis of the Wexner deposition. We are talking about 5 grueling hours of sworn testimony, and he casually admits the feds never even knocked on his front door, despite thousands of pages of documents explicitly naming him as a primary co-conspirator.
That is the textbook definition of obstruction of justice, plain and simple. The system aggressively protects its own. If Epstein was an active intelligence asset from Assad, and likely shared that gathered compromise directly with the CIA, then protecting Wexner, the primary money man, is suddenly classified as a matter of vital national security. The nothing burger narrative the media constantly feeds us is a deliberate cover-up for a massive, state-sanctioned blackmail operation. They literally can't expose Epstein's full network without exposing themselves and bringing down the entire government.
It's an overwhelming amount of information to process. We have a government openly at war with its own judiciary over illegal tariffs, a military potentially walking blind into a hypersonic missile trap in the Gulf, a massive tech sector fleeing the country for Canada, and a ruling political class exposed as literal bedfellows with monstrous traffickers. But then, right in the middle of all this darkness and chaos, we have this very strange distraction.
The timing of this is highly suspect, to say the very least.
Immediately following the massive Epstein file dump and the United States' controversial withdrawal from the World Health Organization, we are suddenly seeing a massive flood of announcements regarding miraculous cancer breakthroughs. Analysis from Kim Iverson and Jonathan Otto highlights this bizarre correlation in timing.
It's the classic bread and circuses technique, but applied with a modern medical twist. When the general populace is about to revolt, because they finally realize their leaders are absolute monsters, you give them a miracle. You dangle a shiny, life-saving cure to change the headlines.
But are the miracles real? Or is this just vaporware designed to eat up the news cycle?
Let's actually look at the specific medical data. We have a major Spanish study released on pancreatic ductal adenocarcinoma, which is one of the deadliest, fastest-moving cancers, showing complete tumor elimination in the mice models.
Pancreatic cancer is universally considered a death sentence. Complete elimination without massive toxicity is virtually unheard of in standard oncology. And we also have the sudden release of the photodynamic therapy data. This involves using concentrated red light combined with methylene blue, showing 100% remission rates in small human pilot studies for cutaneous T-cell lymphoma.
The underlying science behind that specific therapy is absolutely fascinating. The methylene blue compound preferentially accumulates inside the rapidly dividing cancer cells. When you hit that specific area with a precise wavelength of red light, it causes a massive oxidative burst that kills the cancer cell completely from the inside out. It's highly targeted, it's incredibly cheap, it doesn't require a patented $100,000 chemotherapy drug.
And there's also the new glioblastoma study involving nicotine receptors and cobra toxin showing a massive twofold drop in brain tumor proliferation.
The raw science is actually incredibly compelling across all these studies, and that is the true tragedy of it. These specific technologies, the biological off switches, the non-pharmaceutical interventions, things that don't require expensive, lifelong chemical prescriptions, they have highly likely been suppressed by the medical establishment for years.
Jonathan Otto explicitly calls it the cancer off switch in his analysis. He points out the obvious financial reality that Big Pharma has absolutely no fiduciary interest in a permanent cure. They only have an interest in continuous treatment. A patient on brutal chemotherapy for 5 years is a highly profitable asset. A patient cured in a single week by a cheap red light protocol is a total loss of revenue.
Precisely. A permanently cured patient is a lost customer to the medical industrial complex. But right now, today, the political elites desperately need a media distraction, so incredibly powerful that it overrides the Epstein hunting emails and the horrific war drumbeats. So suddenly, the invisible suppression lifts, the vault opens. We get the miraculous cures, but only because they urgently need to dangle a shiny object in front of the public while they loot the national treasury and start a catastrophic war in the Middle East. It's deeply cynical, but it perfectly fits the established historical pattern of how major information is managed by the state.
So let's take a breath and try to synthesize all of this data for the listener. We've covered an immense amount of ground today. From the dangerous waters of the Strait of Hormuz to the Canadian power grid, from the sprawling server rooms of Microsoft to the incredibly dark corners of Little St. James. What does this all fundamentally mean for the person listening to this right now?
It means the ground beneath your feet is actively shifting. We are witnessing the real-time collapse of the core systems you have relied on your entire life.
We have the Carney principle in full action, fight the floor. The electrical energy grid you completely trust to keep your lights on and your family warm is currently being weaponized in a trade dispute.
The fundamental legal protections you think you have under the Constitution are being casually ignored by an executive branch that thinks it's above the Supreme Court.
The technological dominance that currently powers your 401k and the national economy is packing up and moving to Toronto because the United States is now formally classified as a Tier 1 operational risk.
And the moral authority of the people currently in charge has been definitively revealed to be completely non-existent. They are literally hunting human beings for sport and plotting constitutional coups while aggressively sending your children off to fight a hypersonic war they haven't even properly planned for.
The ultimate takeaway here is that you absolutely cannot rely on these legacy institutions to save you. They are the exact ones actively tilting the floor you stand on.
Exactly. And remember, the Carney principle cuts both ways. They are fighting the floor, so you need to be prepared for the floor to move under you. Whether that means securing off-grid energy independence for your own home, aggressively diversifying your financial assets away from the highly volatile United States dollar or domestic tech sector, or simply being incredibly, ruthlessly skeptical of the official media narrative regarding war, medicine, and peace.
The veil is fully lifting. The sheer incompetence and the deep malevolence are now clearly visible to anyone paying attention. And once you finally see it, you really can't unsee it.
And historically, that is the single most dangerous moment for any ruling regime. It's when the average people realize the emperor isn't just naked, he's actively holding a hunting rifle and pointing it at them.
On that very sobering note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive. It's a very heavy one, but absolutely necessary to understand where we are heading.
Just one final provocative thought to leave you with today. If a massive data-driven corporation like Microsoft looks at the United States and sees a Tier 1 risk, a risk profile completely equal to a hostile censorship state, maybe you should ask yourself a question. Are there analysts seeing some catastrophic data point that we are all blissfully ignoring? Or are they just reading the exact same writing on the wall that we've discussed here today and acting on it before it's too late?
Something critical for you to mull over this week. If you found this analysis valuable, hit the plus or follow button on your podcast app and give us a like. Subscribe to the Hot News channel for more deep dives. Until we meet again, goodbye.